Welcome to the Angler's Wisdom Podcast,
supercharged by Amped Outdoors Lithium.
Today, anglers fish longer. Today, anglers fish harder. Today, anglers rely more than ever on their electronics. It all comes down to catching more fish, and today, anglers rely on Amped Outdoors lithium batteries, period.
catch more fish,
Learn tips, tricks,
techniques, and secrets, and decades of angler's wisdom. Welcome to the show.
Oh, yeah! Yeah! Oh!
Oh, that's a nice one.
Yeah!
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Angler's Wisdom Podcast. I got a pretty incredible show for you today. It's one that has kind of been rolling around in my head for many years. I just didn't have any details beyond that. But being very mechanical, I always am fascinated by, the different strategies and everything it takes to design a good kayak, whether it's recreational kayak or whitewater, surf ski, and especially obviously fishing kayaks. So I put together this show for you. I have Hans Nutz and Shane Benedict joining us today. Hans is the head designer over at Bonafide Kayaks. He is the brainchild or the father of the XTR 130, the RVR 119, and one other one I'll mention in the show. And Shane Benedict is from Native Watercraft, and he's the founder or co-founder of Liquidlogic, but most importantly, he's also the father of the Native Titan X, which is what I'm in. So let's go ahead and bring these gentlemen in, and we're going to dive right into it. How you doing?
Very well. How are you?
What's
Doing
up,
great.
Joe? How's it going?
Doing well. Oh, yeah, the SS127 was the other one.
Yep.
Awesome. So I think we'll just kind of get started. Just kind of give each of you just a couple of minutes to give us kind of a quick rundown of your journey into kayaking and kayak design, and what first inspired you to take up the field.
You got this, Hans.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I'll start here. I definitely started in whitewater kayaking. I guess I was a little behind Shane because when I started whitewater kayaking, I think one of my earliest boats was probably one of the ones that Shane had designed. So that's I got into whitewater first, and found myself eventually. I'm a product designer, but I found myself designing boats, whitewater boats, for a brand called Wave Sport, and in that process, realized that kayak fishing was just kind of growing, and so the fishing side of it just had a lot of appeal to me for several reasons. But I got out in a kayak, just a recreational kayak, and went fishing, and I was like, man, this could be a lot better. So that's kind of how I got into it, and had an early project that I was working on called the Ride. It was the Ride X was the boat that I first started working on. Just started unlocking different things that we thought we could do better. So, and then that was, I don't even know how many years ago that was, maybe 2013. So all these years later, we keep going. So I guess that's kind of my entry into kayak fishing.
That's pretty awesome. You know, I knew Shane was from the whitewater side of things. I didn't know that you were. That's it's definitely something that's very intriguing for me, especially being on Lake Erie. First time I got into a little bit of whitewater, you know, it's kind of a lot of the same things, you know, the way that water moves and everything like that, but it's a totally different environment. So it's something that I'm definitely looking at getting into. Maybe I'll come down and you guys can take me out.
Yeah, definitely.
100%. 100%.
Awesome. Go ahead, Shane.
Well, I'm actually a little scared to say how long I've been doing kayaking. I started as a kid when I was 15, and 45 years later, you do the math. I'm getting old. But I come from a little bit different background. Like I'm a whitewater guy my whole life, but I love the detail in fishing kayaks. And one of the funny things that happened for me was it would have been 86, I think, 1986, 87. I took a kayak instructor course. I was maybe in college, I think. Yeah, I was in college. And there was this guy in our kayak instructor course who was fishing off the coast of Florida, and he was taking a whitewater kayak and he was running his fishing line through the bow grab loop of his boat and dropping it down, trying to catch big fish and letting them haul him all over the place. And that was my first exposure to like, oh, wait a minute, this is a pretty cool idea. And I'm not an avid fisherman. However, like when I go on river trips, I go look, you know, and I'm staying overnight. I try to catch fish so that I can eat from right where I'm camping and all that. And so a lot of my design experience in fishing kayaks comes from the pro staff and my desire to watch what they do and try to experience it in a different way and look at it from a different angle. Because I don't come from your world of fishing kayaks. I come from my world of just enjoying the water and knowing how hulls flow through the water, and then also being really inspired by all the detail and technical things that you guys do with kayaks. You know, it's totally different from us whitewater guys who are all we care about is how it flows through the water.
Exactly. I mean, and you know, that kind of transfers over in the fishing side of things, at least for me. You know, when I started fishing the Lake Erie Walleye Trail, they didn't have a kayak division or anything like that. Just, you know, $130,000 walleye boats, you know, with 400 horsepower motors and stuff like that. But I wanted the opportunity to learn and expand my horizon, you know, and get the opportunity to fish in new places that, you know, I'd probably talk myself out of not fishing just because of, you know, easy. And one of the things that taught me competing against the boats, you know, because obviously I was not going to go out there and beat these boat guys. You know, I was only one angler. They had two and much more capable crafts. But, you know, the logistics that goes into it, I mean, there was some tournaments where I'd cover 40, 50 miles, you know, and I mean, I would carry 3 Torqeedo 1103 batteries, and I could have done it with 2. I would have had to go a little bit slower. You know, it's a sacrifice. You go a little bit slower, you save some power, but you're losing fishing time as well. So, you know, one of the things that I started looking at is like how to make it even a tenth more efficient, just like what they do in the racing world, where they're, you know, ripping out dashes and taking out seats just to get that little tiny extra edge. But we'll definitely dive into that a little bit later in the show. I think I've seen the angler's wisdom light on. So Philly D, what's the question? Dean Bowling says, Hans, give us insight on how the SS-127 came to light.
Yeah, that could be a pretty long question overall, but but as far as like I guess some of the genesis of the whole thing was that I think, Luther and I were both kind of wanting to make something a good bit different than what existed at the time. And, and so we set about to basically build a boat from the ground up. And we had a couple of great guys with us. Matt was doing engineering for us, a guy named Matt Monterulli and Jake Fuller. But I think initially, we were talking about building a boat that was, it was going to be the original one was a true catamaran. Believe it or not, nobody really ever saw it. The hull didn't quite work, but we do an iteration process with what we do. So we went through a bunch of iterations on scale models and stability tests and things like that. And I wanted to do a true catamaran, but I just couldn't make it work quite right. It was too noisy. And so we eventually, I worked on this modifying the catamaran hull, still getting a lot of stability out of it. But I think the main goal, actually, I have a sketch I can share later. It was one of the earlier boat sketches. But the main goal was really to just maximize the fishable functionality of it, but also make it like something, because we didn't have a pedal drive, and we wanted it to be, you could still paddle it, you could still haul your gear, but we wanted to maximize every inch of the space. So that was kind of where the junk drawer came from underneath, hatch that flips open in 2 directions, stuff like that. So that was kind of I would say like the main like push in the early days of trying to figure out how to make all that stuff work.
Interesting. I don't think I've been in the SS-127. I was in was it the SS-107? It was Wade Clements' boat from Yakutak when we went down on the New River. My first time on whitewater, and obviously I made some mistakes. Mistakes were made. It was kind of funny because we came down, it was maybe class 2s, I think he said. And we came down this one run, and he pulled over to this eddy over here, and I was going to eddy out behind him. Well, earlier on in the trip, I had made a mistake and got caught sideways on a ledge. So I'm like adjusting my center of balance on the kayak so that it doesn't roll this way with the water pressure. So I was moving actually more towards the ledge and trying to hop it off. Nice. And fortunately, I didn't go in that time. But when I came down this chute and I seen Wade, I realized there's that ledge, right? So I tried to flip around, and the current caught me, flipped me over. Totally my fault, but really cool boats.
Some of those boats, with some of those holes, like the 107 is super, it's a super boxy hull. So it has tons of stability, but in a river, it can get you into trouble too. And so those are some of the differences between like an RVR versus an SS, like a 107. One's really built so that when you hit those bumps and ledges, it will get up over them, whereas the other one could catch it. So sounds like you found your edge.
Yeah. That's it's funny because I never knew that. I'm always saying like, we don't know what we don't know. And in that moment, I didn't really know what the hell happened.
Yeah.
And went back and looked at the footage, and I seen, as soon as I turned and I just leaned just slightly, just enough for that current to catch that edge. And then it was over.
Yeah.
So our next question is, how have you seen the industry change since both of you have first started with kayak design?
Shane, you want to take that one?
I mean, I can start. Our first, fishing focused kayak was And to say fishing focused, it was loosely fishing focused, was the Manta Ray, a paddling kayak, and it was in 2000. Well, as far as Liquidlogic goes, it was 2004, I think, is when we were developing that. And we actually had a kayak. We had a guy that was really adamant about how awesome kayaks could be for fishing, and he came up and we worked together to develop the Manta Ray, and it was a totally different world. That was a 30-inch wide paddle kayak with some rod holders and a few other the niceties that are abundant now. And now but he the focus then was the purity of kayaking and paddling your kayak and going around and being able to handle your kayak and throw it on top of your car and all that stuff. And now I now know more about batteries and electronics than I ever thought I would know. That's the difference from back then to now. Like it's a completely different world where my influencers, the people that I was working with, were like, you cannot design a kayak over 30 inches wide. And now people are saying, you can design a kayak as wide as you want. It just needs to be able to put everything on it, and so that's, I mean, I can't even explain the difference. It's a whole completely new world, which is super fun as a designer, because I get to, enter into all these new details and new nuances of all these. I mean, electronics, that was never on the radar back then.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I started in the Wilderness Systems Pungo 140, so a little bit different than most of the anglers out there. And I'll tell you, that kayak taught me a lot, but it was also very limited by its abilities. Of course, it couldn't handle as big of water. I had to worry about water getting in the cockpit and, making it a little bit more unstable. But it was a super fast boat, and I really, really enjoyed it. When I got into the Old Town Big Water 132, the pedal drive system, that was a total game changer, because I'm used to fighting the winds and waves of Lake Erie in a paddle kayak while trolling maybe true trips or, trying to get to fish to cast or something like that. And having that pedal drive system with that 10-to-1 gear ratio, just like, the propel drive, it was a total game changer. So much easier to cover the water. And at the end of the day, I think people put labels on things, and maybe it's just out of boredom, but you got to look at it like, does this do what I need it to do? Yes or no? If the answer is yes, who cares what label or title, is tossed around? I remember when the XTR 130 came out, and everybody's like, oh, that's not a kayak, that's a boat. Well, fact of the matter is every kayak is technically a boat, right?
Yep.
But I was laughing because I'm like, well, why didn't they get upset about the Titan X? Because that was the first one that was like, here's a huge platform that you can do everything that you want. So on that side of things, it's a really cool progression into kayaks. But like I was talking to somebody yesterday about transporting kayaks and just ease of use, and at this point, I'm efficient, but 20-minute setup time, at the boat ramp. And you multiply that's 40 minutes a day times 5-6 days a week. It's a lot of time. And I catch myself fantasizing about the days where I just grab the pungo and carry it to the water, or,
Yep.
I've even thought about like just a lightweight paddleboard that I could just go hit a river and, I'm on the water in 5 minutes. I can get my on the water, my fix, and, get back off. But I think it really comes down to, kayaks are like golf clubs, right? You're not going to take a putter to go play 9 holes. And maybe you guys can elaborate on that a little bit, just the, the differences.
Yeah, it's we've definitely seen, the idea that one boat does it all is you know, it's still there. You can own one fishing kayak, but there, if you have the ability to own more than one, and you fish different types of waters, obviously, we now have so many hole designs that you can choose a hole that like fits the water that you typically are going to fish, and that's what I would say. You know, kind of going back to that putter analogy for golf, like for us, I mean, I would just say like choose a kayak that's going to fit the water that you fish the most, because it'll probably still work well for some of the other conditions. But you know, of course, if you can own two kayaks, I'm happy for you to buy an extra kayak. But I would say some of these boats are designed a little bit better for, you know, hauling a lot of gear, flatter water, more lake conditions. Even if lakes have swells, they're going to be better in those conditions. And then, you know, finding a boat that like is sized for if you're going into rivers, are you doing tight rivers? Are you talking about big river flows? You know, all that stuff sort of matters. So just in that sense, you know, you got to choose your golf club wisely, I suppose. And then really after that, and you know, the boat becomes better and better the more you use it, and the more comfortable you get with where your gear is at. And so a lot of people don't necessarily even know some of the best paddling and maneuvering techniques that they could have. And so when they're on the water, they're like, oh, my boat doesn't do this or that. Well, you know, that's kind of where actual having some kayak experience does make a difference. So I don't know. There's a couple of things, I guess, for you on the selection of boats, I guess.
Uh-oh, I lost you.
He's on mute.
I can't hear you, Chuck.
Oh, looks like Chuck's having some difficulties.
Okay.
Give me just a second. Let him get that figured out. Let me unmute and mute him. Chuck, you there? It looks like his microphone might have died out.
Oh, sorry about that. That was my
There
fault.
we go.
Nice.
I turned it off when Hans was speaking. I thought I was giving feedback. But what I was saying is, you know, the most common question is like, what kind of kayak should I buy? And you know, there's not just one answer to that, right? The important part is just highlighting what's your primary use. You know, like what are you going to be doing? Where are you going to be fishing? What techniques do you usually you know, prefer? Like obviously, if you like to jig for crappie, you're going to want something with spot lock. If you're like me and you have a big body of water that you need to cover a lot of water and find out where the fish move to today, you know, a system like the Torqeedo electric outboard, you know, that's going to get you there faster, but you're sacrificing that ability to hold position, right? So you try to pinpoint those key areas, you know, like what is the perfect kayak for you? What is the perfect situation for you? Can you use it for other things? Absolutely, but you know, 90% of the time, this is where you live, right? You know, so I think it's actually a great time. Today is producer Phil's 40th birthday, so I told him I wanted to bring him on the show and just basically give him the opportunity to ask some questions. You know, he's fairly new to kayak fishing. He ended up in one of my Slayer Maxes from last year.
I liked them so much I bought two of them.
Yeah.
Nice.
And you know, he's a little bit of a bigger guy. You know, people look at these kayaks like, hey, I'm a big guy. What kayak can I do? And we look back at those old sit inside kayaks, and you know, big guys, it was very challenging. But today, these kayaks are incredible. So we'll just bring Philly in real quick and give him a few minutes to ask a couple of questions, you know, for the bigger guys, because obviously I can't relate. And at the end, then we're gonna wish Philly D a happy birthday live on camera.
Oh God! What?
We'll bounce
I
back
told
with
you
the,
no.
questions.
Didn't I just say no? All right. So for context, guys, I'm 6'2". I'm 345 pounds, and I run across this a lot on newer kayak fishing forums on Facebook and the like. And when it comes to big guys, my question to you is: do you guys keep that in mind when you try to design fishing kayaks? Like make what kind of a one size fits all, or or do you have to go up in width and length, or how does that work? That's my question.
You want to take that one, Shane?
Sure. Yeah, hopefully this isn't taken as derogatory, but fishermen are bigger than whitewater kayakers. And we are always considering weight capacity. It's a big deal. Literally. There's a lot of different things to think about when you think about weight capacity, because if you think about somebody being 150 pounds versus somebody being 340 pounds, the boat lifts out of the water a lot more, and so that changes the way it performs. So it's going to track differently, it's going to float differently, it's going to turn differently, because obviously a heavier person is going to sit deeper in the water, so therefore more of the boat is engaged, and so it doesn't want to turn as easily, whereas a light person, the boat's going to drift up higher, and therefore it's going to be a lot more in fact, it's going to get blown around a lot more. So there is this fine line that we're always kind of walking along, where we're trying to make a boat that'll sit in the water and not get blown around, but yet be able to maintain, and carry a big weight capacity. And that's a Hans and I, that's where we lose sleep at night, thinking about that balance between all those things. It's a big deal. And obviously the more capacity is basically always better, because you guys are putting more stuff on your kayaks every year. We're like, now we have to think about this. The nice thing is now batteries are starting to get lighter, so that's appreciative. I'll appreciate that.
But it's also like, it's definitely like a blend of give and take, right? So like weight capacity going up, and then you got speed. I can't do the drop. You got speed and maneuverability sometimes kind of going the other way. So, if you're thinking about this, like if you yourself weigh up on the upper end, then you need to realize too that, like, hey, I may need to bring a little less gear, because that's going to help you when you're out on the water. Whereas if you're on the lighter end, you may want more gear, to be honest, because it can help you. Some of these boats actually need to be down in the water a little bit further to perform. So, and then, when it comes to, you're looking at a hull, if you have a boat like let's say like the XTR, that hull is going to spread all that weight out nice and wide, which means it's going to be real shallow. It could sit real shallow in the water, which means you're skimming over stuff.
Right.
If you have an offshore boat, something with kind of a rounded hull, it's going to sit deeper, which is better in some situations. So knowing what your hull is shaped to do matters a lot in the environments that you're going into. And so tie that in with capacity. We try to. I'd say that Shane and I both, we try to set out to say, look, we're gonna build a boat that contains this type of paddler, not paddler, angler. See, I'm going back to my an angler that fits sort of this size range, and they're going to have 2 batteries, 2 motors,
Exactly.
Paddle, whatever. And it's like we have to set all that stuff out, and then Shane has a pretty elaborate process for even figuring some of that stuff out, which is pretty amazing. So, yeah, there's quite a bit.
I mean, we do. We literally will simulate the amount of weight throughout the entire kayak. So we have not only the kayak weight, and we have the peddler weight, motorized guy weight. Then we have your gear box, your black pack, whatever. You have your battery and all those positions, and that actually gives us a center of mass, and we can evaluate how that's going to affect the hull. And then, and then deciding, how people are going to have bow motors and stern motors, and where are they going to put their batteries and all that stuff. It's a big little chess game that we play with, how do we tune the hull to fit this wide range of usages is again, one of the things that keeps Hans and I up at night.
And that's a great point. You just said how to tune the hull. And I think most of the industry, we don't think about that. I do, just because I'm in a little bit different situation, and I have a certain way I like my kayak set up. But having that weight distribution, everybody's different. Everybody's gear's different. Your position and where you're setting your seat might be different with the pedal drive. So just keep that in mind. Your weight distribution, move things around, and that definitely can affect the performance. Like for me, I actually like to have almost a planing look, because I like my bow to be out of the water just a little bit more, because it keeps me a lot drier. And especially, when it's cold, I like to stay dry. It might slow me down a little bit because obviously, the way that the water's hitting the scuppers and stuff like that. But so just want to say to everybody out there, think about that this spring.
And keep an idea, keep that in mind too. Even on big boats like the Titan X or the XTR, you can, when you're experimenting with it, you can set it up in such a way that it's not going to perform that great. Even the wiring from your battery to your motor, stuff like that, can all affect it. So you have to really think about, like, when you're building out your rigging and stuff, you really need to think about where your batteries are going to be and what that's going to look like in the water when that boat's under power and it starts to it gets a little stern sag. How much stern sag are you going to have? If you put all your weight to the back, you're going to make it worse. So you may need to put some to the front, or vice versa. So just thinking through where all that stuff trims out, so the boat has a really nice level aspect when you're moving is important.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and just like to add on to that, like you got, if I speak just from the Native, side of things, if you look at a Slayer Max versus a Titan X, the hull is designed completely differently. In the Titan X, we actually added a bunch more volume towards the bow because we knew more people would throw a bow motor on them, and more people would be standing, and more people would, so therefore you're throwing all the weight and mass to the front. So that bow actually moved the entire cockpit of the boat back so that there was more volume in front of you to hold up that motor. Whereas if you look at a Slayer Max, the focus, yes, you can put a bow motor on it and it'll work great, but you're adding, we wanted it to be a little more streamlined. So we moved the cockpit, slightly forward so that you had more carrying capacity behind you. And, it's just you're always moving all these components around, and that weight and that volume, you're always calculating that and what the focus is of that design.
As a big guy who's just getting into it, and I just for the record, Natives are my loving kayaks. The Slayer Maxes are what I love, but I really feel like as a bigger guy, a little extra width really helps, which is why when I get a moment, I'm actually going to personally upgrade to the Titan X, simply due to the fact that it has a little extra width and a little extra weight capacity. And I mean, Chuck weighs about as much as my left leg. Let's just tell him like it is.
Hey, I got something for that too, buddy.
We already talked about this. All right. While I'm here, guys, there's a couple questions that have come through. Give me just a half a second because the chat kind of went nuts when we started talking about big people. All right. This one's for you, Shane. Why has Native never tried to attach the drive opening cover to the propel drive? I really thought that was an interesting question.
No, I mean, to be totally honest, it's really a major design problem. Let's start from the beginning. Our drive has been very solid for a really long time. We've had one of the things that you see in the industry is that some drives are solid, some drives are not. Our drive has been really solid for a long time, and to change that drive has been really scary for us. The drive cover, believe me, it's a pain in my butt, and we are constantly trying to work on that and think about ways that we can improve that. And I don't know if it's ever going to be attached to it because it's such a perfect fit that has to make it seal, especially when you guys start talking about motorizing. So like if we don't use the drive, what do we use to cover the opening of the drive scupper? How do we make it work for people that don't even want they want the drive as a secondary? They want it as their backup propel, their backup motorization. How do we, if you have to take it off the drive, how does that work? There's a lot of complexities in that. And believe me, I'm totally on board with that idea. And we're trying to figure that out. But it's a complex issue for sure.
I can imagine it is. One solution I did find as a big guy for the propel issues, you guys make scupper plugs for it. So what I did was I did all the scupper plugs in all 10 holes and then put the scupper in the propel once I dropped my trolling motor down. And it seems to keep the water from coming in and kicking in a little bit better. Yep. But ultimately, that a little extra weight, like that extra 50 pounds on the Titan X, I really think that'll be huge for big guys like me. And let me tell you, that thing is beautiful.
Nice.
My compliments to y'all, man. All right, got another one here. This one is what would be the lowest trolling thrust for trolling motor that could maintain spot lock?
It's a good question. I mean, it depends on the hull too, right? A little bit, but
I feel like that's maybe more wind related. For spot lock, because I don't think it would take too much to hold spot, but I'm not sure.
Wind or current, maybe.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's going to be really, I think, more of a current or wind related issue, and how really it's like the big problem I've found with spot lock is just how much it hunts. So once you get on a spot, can you stay there without kind of getting jerked around and stuff like that? So
yeah, that gets a little complicated, huh? Because I mean, environments and everything.
All right. Well, I'm going to hop out of here and get back to the backstage. You guys get back to doing what you do.
Way to represent the 300-pounders.
I just want to pop this up for I didn't have a chance to fix it, but there's your capacity, buddy. And, that boat acted like it was nothing. We played around. So in the paddling world, they have this game. I forget what it's called, but it's basically like a bean bag, right? And they put it on their paddle and they throw it to each other. And I don't know if you miss it or catch it, like one of them rolls. So they were throwing it to us, and we're just messing around on that kayak.
Nice.
And I think what we'll do, we'll save your happy birthday to the end. That way, make sure we get through a couple more of these questions, and And then
if y'all
we'll
find me
figure it out.
missing, if y'all find me missing right before the end, you know why. All right, do what y'all do. I'm going back.
Thanks,
Wait,
brother.
did he say 40 years old? The
Yeah.
young punk.
Yes.
Young punk.
Yeah.
I'm young, but I'm no punk. Just saying.
Oh man. Well, I guess the next direction to go into would be material and construction techniques. But before we get into that, what are some of the most common misconceptions people have about what goes into producing a high quality kayak?
That it's easy.
You go for it, Hans. You're good.
No, that's that's a good question. I mean, I guess some of the things I see or hear are that, obviously I hear a lot about how fishing kayaks are overpriced. So, that they shouldn't be that expensive. But the quality of the kayaks that we produce, I think, really lands on the shoulders of our ops team and our production team. That these things are not getting just spit out of an injection molder somewhere. These are like the people that run our equipment have been doing it a long time, many of them, and they're very, very good at it. And it really matters. The recipes we run, all the little details that go into getting it to come out of the oven just right, and making sure that all those details are cooling the right way, and the material thickness is correct. It all matters. So I guess I would say that there's a ton of work that goes into these things. The raw material, just the materials alone, are fairly expensive. All of the equipment to pull this off, it's pretty amazing. And so I guess I will take this opportunity to just throw praise at our factory.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and especially if you take a look at, say, like a Sun Dolphin versus a Titan X, I mean, totally different apples to oranges. And nothing wrong with the Sun Dolphin. I'm a firm believer any kind of kayak that gets you on the water safely is a good kayak. But there's ones that just make it more enjoyable, right? A couple of the things that I see. Number one is the quality of the plastic, right? Because plastic is not all just the same. The composition or composition of the materials that make that plastic, it could be very very hard and get brittle fast, and end up cracking. It could be very soft and just gouge easy, so there's a lot of factors in that as well. A reputable manufacturer is always going to use the best materials they can, because they're also there on the back end, which really, like, a good product is only a good product with the customer service and the support and the care, like you gentlemen being on here and talking to the community, and just just continuing to try to raise the ship.
I mean, if I can, I would add, if you're okay with that. But every time I tour somebody around our factory or show them images of the different things that happen in our factory, they're shocked at how much work goes into making a kayak. Like, the molding the plastic shell is one thing, but then even just a hatch is a sub-assembly, because it takes a bungee on top, or maybe a groove track, or maybe a gasket that goes around it, or a trim that makes it smooth. Like, that one thing, making that hatch work right, is a sub-assembly that goes to a different department. The foam that goes inside, maybe to support part of the floor. The rudder assembly is assembled by another person. Like, it's truly amazing. It's so much that is put into a single kayak, and especially a fishing kayak. Whether it's a rod tube or gaskets that go onto any of those features. Every single time I show somebody the entire process of a fishing kayak coming together, they're like, I had no idea. That's crazy. You know, that's the response I get every single time.
Yeah, it is pretty crazy. Fortunately, I have a pretty substantial mechanical background, and even spent some time rebuilding injection molding machines. So I have
Nice.
a little bit of an understanding on plastic manufacturing. Obviously, clueless when it comes to roto molding, but it's just it's very, very fascinating to me. You know, and one thing that I wanted to ask. So on my kayak, I'm running the Titan X 12.5, and I have the Torqeedo 1103, and also I have a Torqeedo 1104 on another one. And one day I'm sitting in the shop or standing in a shop playing with the kayaks, you know, like we all do. And I looked and I'm like, what happens if I remove the rudder completely? You know, because I mean, the rudder, it is beneficial because I could just do 360 spins if I wanted to. But I'm thinking without that rudder, the water would actually have a smoother transition off of the stern of that hull into the Torqeedo, right? Have you ever thought about that or tried it?
I mean, we've played around with it, and it totally depends on how you dealing with that rudder. Like if you have that rudder, if you know, you can tighten that screw in the top of the rudder and tighten it down, and that's going to create a tracking experience, which is actually going to make it track better, right? Or if you leave it loose, then it is going to create some chaos back there. You know, that as you move the motor around, the rudder is going to move around, and that is going to create some turbulence. I think in general, it's going to be pretty mild. I'd be interested to hear what your experience was with that. I could totally see getting rid of it because it would actually allow the motor to turn the boat just a little better, because there is a hub that the whole rudder is enclosed in, that if you get rid of that hub, then there's less keel in essence. So therefore it would allow the motor to turn the kayak a little bit better without it in place. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, interesting. You know, and you brought up a good point about the rudder. One thing to keep in mind, these kayaks, you know, they shrink and swell, right? So right out of the factory, they're probably not going to have everything super tight because it gets shipped to you and then it's over tight, right?
Yep.
Fortunately, it's super easy to adjust. I think if you go on the Native website, there's a video on adjusting that rudder. But you know, if you adjust it tight, the thing is phenomenal. I mean, and the boat, I'm not even too concerned about tracking because I'm using foot pedal steering.
Right.
I was just, you know, I look at these guys with the walleye boats flying at 60 mile an hour, and I wonder, could I get another half mile?
Well, I mean, so just to kind of go back to where you were, is like, we call rotational molding, like it's called the black art of plastics. Like it is, if the humidity is different or the temperature is different or the, you know, all those things actually affect the boat. And that's why, like Hans praising our operators, like they're constantly being aware of the programs and the recipes that we're using. But like if you take a boat off of the top of your car that's been hot all day and you drop it in cold water, it's going to shrink like a lot of other things. And suddenly your cords are slack, right? Because the boat actually gets slightly shorter. And so it is important to like think about how temperatures and humidity and all that stuff affects everything. You know, that's a big deal. It's a game changer. And you've got to accommodate, think about adjusting things as the temperatures change. And the biggest, you guys do not store your kayaks in the sun. We have all of our plastics have this UV prohibitive, and it's like I think it's a guaranteed thing for 5 years, but every day that it's sitting out there baking in the sun is another day that it's not living past 25 years old, you know, that kind of thing.
Yep. And also applying some 303 protectant helps, right?
I mean, I'm not a huge like go coat your kayaks in 303 because the plastic is actually built with UV prohibitants in it. Maybe as the boat gets older, that would be a great thing. to really cook it. The main thing is like just store them in the shade, you know, and they'll last forever. I've got kayaks that I've had out in the wild, and they're 20 years old and they're fine. Right. But I just don't leave them laying out in the deadbeat sun, you know?
Yeah. And like for me, I mean, I try to take care of my gear and stuff, but like, I just don't like the idea of spraying a chemical or, you know, 303 or anything like that that's not natural, and then going into, you know, my amazing fishery.
Agreed. 100%. That's why I'm not really a big fan of it. The plastic is actually built with the UV protection, and
gotcha.
you know, the safest thing you can. It's going to be fine, but the more you store it in the shade, the better it's going to be.
Right. So before we move on to the next thing, I definitely wanted to bring up Eric Gadsden's suggestion. I hear this often, you know, you look at my kayak and it's a freak of nature, but you got to realize there's trips where I'm taking 5 different anglers out, and I'm not loading them up with all kinds of gear to get in the way. So I'm the porcupine. I'm the guy carrying all that gear. But you always hear that just get a boat, or you should have just bought a boat, you know, and I laugh because, first of all, like, who am I to tell you what to spend your money on, right? And secondly, if you look at the environment, okay, so if you're fishing a small river or a small lake, yeah, you could get a $500 John boat and be just fine. But if you're fishing Lake Erie, you could maybe drop 15 grand on a used boat, but it's Lake Erie, man. And if that boat fails at some point, somehow, you're either going down, trying to get rescued, or worse, you know. And at the end of the day with the kayak, boats, there's a point of no return. That boat fails, they're done. You know, the boat's capsized. With a kayak, other than, you know, having a big freaking gouge or hole or something like that, or a hatch open, you just get back in it and continue on your day, you know. So that's why I feel more comfortable in a kayak out there than a boat, because I know no matter what, I'm prepared and I'm going to make it back with my vessel, you know. That's interesting.
Well, you know, it's a lot of fun to be at a boat ramp with one of these rigged out kayaks, you know, and and have people come find it and just kind of go like, what are you doing? You know, why didn't you just buy a boat? It's a fun conversation. So I'm more than happy to have that conversation. It's a lot of times it's stuff that people don't think about. For me, personally, I love being out on a kayak because when the motors are off and it's just you and a couple of fishing rods sticking up in the air and the wind's whistling through the braid, it's pretty awesome, you know. Well, you know, we've all been there. You've been sitting on some spot that's absolutely gorgeous, and here comes some glitter rocket, and you're like, oh, you know, just blew your piece for a minute, you know. So when you talk to people about that, how it's just you're just getting out and getting away, and it's so different. It's so different from fishing off of a bigger boat. Not that there's anything wrong with doing that, but when you start talking about that, a lot of times someone will be like, well, I'd never thought about that. So it really gives you a chance to talk to people about why it's such a great sport.
Exactly. And isn't that what we're all meant to do, you know, is just have civilized conversations and try to understand the other person's point of view, because that's how we all become wiser, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to me, even our giant boats, the XCR or the Titan X, even those crazy big boats, you can access in places that, what'd you say, sparkle rockets?
Glitter
rockets, yeah.
Glitter rockets. You know, they can't go there. They can't enter in those places. You know, And as much as people like to take care of these kayaks and they get nervous about scratching them up and all that, Titan X or an XTR, you can drag it down a bank and throw it in the river, or throw it in the lake. And you can, wheel it with whatever cart you have and get to a spot and then drag it right down the rocks. And polyethylene plastic, man, it takes a beating. So you can put in crazy places. Yeah, getting out's going to be harder. I'll admit that. But, you can get to some different places because of these boats. And especially when you drop down a little bit smaller. Me, I'm a Slayer LTE. I'm a Slayer Propel 10 guy. I like being able to put it on top of my car and throw it in anywhere. But you can do the same thing with these big boats to an extent, obviously.
Right. Hans, you wanted to add something?
I was just going to say, like, if you want to see what rotomolded kayaks can do, just go search up the Green Race and watch what Shane does every fall. And if you want to see what the same plastic that's going into our fishing kayaks is going into these boats that go down the green every year. And you want to talk about a beating, watch those boats go over Gorilla, rapid backwards or Sunshine or any of those. I mean, some of those rapids are absolutely just wicked to go over. And I've been down some of those rapids. I had to walk several of them myself, and Shane goes down them like it's nothing. So,
I do laugh when I see the guys that are worried about the scratches on their kayak, and I'm like, bro, you're fine.
Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah. Go watch somebody boof off of one of those rapids and see that plastic can take a beating.
Yeah.
Right. Or like Eric Jackson was that was kind of my first real exposure into whitewater was when I was in Portugal with Eric for the World Championship, and he was showing me all these pictures and videos. He's on Rock
Island.
Rock Island, yes.
Yeah.
And he has like this, or he used to have this giant boulder that every day he would seal launch.
Seal launch. Yeah.
And I'm thinking every single day that kayak is dragging across this rock, going into the water, and it just takes the abuse. It's going to get scratched. It's going to get dinged.
Yeah.
But these things are built. They're built to take it.
I mean, the one place you want to be a little careful. You don't want to drag that thing across the parking lot. That's the worst thing you could do.
Right.
But as far as hitting rocks and getting scratches, you're fine. You're good to go.
Especially like lifting up the front and dragging the keel. You're putting all that weight on that one section.
That one spot. Don't do that.
Might as well just put a piece of sandpaper down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Are you good on time for a couple of more minutes?
Yeah, a couple more minutes. I can do it.
All right. I expected to not even like get to a lot of these questions just because of the amount of information and factors in kayak design. So we might definitely have to do a follow-up episode as well in the future and break into some of this other stuff. Let me see. So what are some of the emerging trends in kayak design that you find exciting, like personally for you, that you find exciting that's, maybe something newly discovered or a new direction or something?
Wow. There's so much going on right now. I think forward-facing sonar has been really interesting to see. Like, I feel like we're still figuring out like how that's going to play into everything. We did these foot braces this past year, and that's not just, that's a simple technology, but for fishing kayaks, it's like it really changes how the boat steers. And so I think that's going to be really cool, and just making all of our motorizable kayaks feel so much better, especially at low speeds. It's just a whole different feel. So our Wizard foot braces, I think that's really cool. But like as far as technology, I don't know. I mean, it's, you know, I hesitate to say too much because I kind of like, I always have to keep stuff I'm working on, but I don't know, Shane, what do you think? You got any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I mean, for sure. I mean, the obvious thing is electronics, and you said forward-facing sonar and all that kind of stuff. But basically, the fishermen are changing. It's constantly evolving. What tools you guys are using, whether it's electronics or even the actual tools, the pliers and the fish grips and all that stuff. And then, some of you guys may remember Woody. Woody was my kind of first intro to the whole hardcore fishing crew. And he talked about the stuff you can reach. And that's, everything you can reach in a kayak, that's important. That space is the golden arc. And with the introduction of electronics and the introduction of different tools and things, that golden arc is like, it's constantly evolving. And so one of the things that I'm always doing, like I've always have a design crew, a bunch of hardcore fishermen that are always working and, playing in that field. They're always saying, dude, what if we did this? And I'm like, and that's the fun for me is I get to watch these passionate fishermen kind of go through these evolutions of, well, now forward-facing sonar or this different tool that I'm starting to use, or what if we had storage here, or what if we did this? I mean, some of you guys may have seen the whole Craftsman tool chest that we were shoving underneath the Titans and stuff like that. Like it's just really fun. It's constantly evolving, and that's what makes it fun for Hans and I is like it keeps changing. We keep finding new ways to maximize the space, maximize the efficiency, and make things work better as we evolve and move forward. It's fun.
I love the efficiency side of it too. I don't know if I could say that that's necessarily technology, but I like the idea of making stuff that if it motorizes well, and if it paddles well, if it pedals, that kind of stuff, making it just tweaking it, like you were saying, Chuck, if I could get a 10th here or there, that's extra bit of distance or less time, stuff like that. So I think the technology side of it, I think we're going to see motors, batteries get better, and really like it allows Shane and I to really focus in on that. We're always, feel like I'm always chasing that perfect, like kind of perfect boat.
Yeah, right.
But that part of it to me is pretty exciting. It's pretty fun to work on the whole side of things, for sure.
Yeah.
Thinking about the progression of fishing kayaks, it's actually very cool that we progressed into kayaks like the Titan X and the Bonafide XTR, because now that we're shifting back towards, hey, we need some good quality lightweight boats that are up to date, right? And they're up to date because of the stuff that we learned with the Titan X and the XTR, right? So I'm really exciting to see what the future holds, and see the sport evolve. So I have two more quick questions, and then we'll wrap up. The first one would be, if you could give one piece of advice to aspiring kayak designers, what would it be?
Oh boy.
You stumped me there.
Stay away. This is my job. No, I don't know. I mean, it's funny. Hans and I come from really different backgrounds, because Hans is an avid fisherman, and I'm an observer. So I like to watch these guys fish, and I like to have a team of fishermen that advise me. And the cool thing is I get to watch from a really different angle. So I think it takes you need to be an observer. You need to be inquisitive. You need to think about what people want, what people, and one of the things what people want is slightly different maybe than what they need. So there's a real, I think inquisitiveness is the greatest thing that a designer could have. What do they really need? What do they want? An observation and watching how they do things. There are definitely a lot of people that are fixated on the specific way they fish, whereas maybe there's a slightly different way they could do the same thing and maybe get more out of it, and maybe we could make it more efficient. I think designers, our job as designers is to, yes, take all that information from the people that have done it and are really good at it, but also try to look at it from a slightly different angle and see if there's a way we can make it better. See if, I think that's the big part of what being a designer is, I think.
Yeah, I will just add real quick to that same thing. I think inquisitiveness, and then I would say you can't get too in love with your own stuff. You have to be willing to break your own thought conventions, or let people break them for you. And
keep an open mind. Yep.
Painful, but that's part of it. You learn so much more when you just listen.
Yep.
And when you let people kind of give you their input. So, yeah, I love. That's probably my favorite thing is the innovation side of it. I get most excited about that. But it's also can be quite terrifying too when you're trying to make
no doubt.
I don't even know if this is going to work.
Yeah,
I agree with that 100%, especially on the rigging side of things, because everybody's different, and my kayak might work for you, but it might not be the best thing, right? So it's just so awesome to dive into all those different aspects and learn. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? Because we're supposed to listen.
Nice.
All right. Finally, what do you hope listeners take away from the episode about the art and science of designing a world-class kayak?
We're still working on it.
It ain't just a lump of plastic, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's a work in progress, and I'd say if you're thinking about if you're into it, or you're thinking about getting into it further, get with one of our dealers, and there's a wealth of knowledge out there, and get with somebody that knows how they can help you do it correctly. It'll save you some money, and it will also allow you to do it in a way that you really you're gonna enjoy it more. So, I think we're all drawn to. I believe a lot of us are drawn to this because we love the rigging possibility of things, and we love fishing. I love just going fishing, and so that part of it I think is there, but also if you're getting more and more into the kayak fishing space, maybe you have a less expensive boat. Let some other people come in and help you figure it out. Get the right boat, and the right equipment.
Absolutely. And exactly. That same thing is realistically, what is the fishing you're going to do? Because there's a boat made for it, and and like Hans said, talk to somebody that's done it. Get on these Facebook pages and talk to them about where you are, your location, what you're really going to do, and there's a boat that's made for that, and maybe even made for your style and what you want to do. But as a starter, as a beginner, go find some people that can help you figure out what you're really going to do. Not what you think you're going to do, but what you're really going to do in what location and what environment. And there's something made for you. There is.
Absolutely. It's that discovery of the things we don't know, right?
Yeah.
And Hans, you said it best, it can save you some money. I see often, I'll meet people and they're like, yeah, I bought this kayak and it worked okay, but then I had to sell this and get this, and maybe they're 2, 3, 4 kayaks in and they still haven't found the right one. Well, that's a lot of investment, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day, save yourself some money, stop at a reputable dealer or reach out to any one of us, anybody that, is in the industry, or out there doing it. We all love sharing the passion. Don't be afraid to ask us questions. We want you to succeed. We want you to have fun, and we want to lead you into the right direction, so that you're happy. Because, you get into a kayak that is not the right thing for you, it could be a disaster and you'll never go kayaking or kayak fishing again, right?
Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Awesome. We have a question, Phil?
Yeah, we have a couple of them, but I know we're running short on time. Give me just a second here. Here we go. I'm sorry about that. Speaking of scratches, I have done research on methods on ways to fix damage incurred during the season, scratch, gouge, etc. Do you have any suggestions on how to do repairs effectively? That's a good question.
I mean, generally for me, and I'm not Shane or Hans. I just plastic weld and fill them in. If they're like deep, if they're not, that's a badge of honor, right?
Yeah. I would say that if somebody is not accomplished as a plastic welder, there's a good chance you're going to do more damage than you're going to do good.
Absolutely.
And I would think about your hot spots. So your bow keel is somewhere you might want to protect. Your stern keel, somewhere that's going to get like hit repeatedly. That might be a place you want to protect. But you're trying to plastic weld that spot is likely going to do more damage than good. All those other scratches around your hull and all that stuff, that is badge of honor. Like you messing with that stuff is most likely going to be detrimental. Unless you feel really comfortable with that kind of repair, I would leave it alone, man. That plastic, we beat the hell out of it. And I'm talking from a whitewater sense. Like we run really hard rapids over really gnarly rocks, and that's what this plastic is designed for. It's for many, 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 many runs. And I understand, if you're in whatever you're in a bed or what, it can get pretty gnarly, and I understand that. And so, but just think about those hot spots, the low places in your hull or the bow and stern keel. Those would be places that you might want to protect. But in the same sense, those sections of the kayak are almost a 1/4 inch thick. They're really stout.
Right.
So
you're absolutely right. I didn't even think into account, if you don't have the ability to plastic weld or you're not mechanical, but reach out to your local shop. I'm sure if you need a repair, they can definitely fix it up for you.
That's right. And even a crack, like a really deep gouge can be repaired by somebody that knows how to weld it. What happens sometimes in rivers is there'll be some like man-made thing, like some rebar or something, and we'll run over something like that and we will get a deep gouge. And so we'll back it with like, with like a window seal. What is it called? I'm trying to think of the technical term. There's a rubber seal that we put on the back of it. Ice shield. What is it for windows and doors? Dang it, I can't remember. We'll put that oftentimes on the back and then do a light weld on the outside. And that's a real extreme case.
You're talking about the window flashing, the rubberized
yes,
stuff?
Exactly. Window flashing. Because we'll put that on the inside of the hull to back it and give it a strong, sort of adhesive sort of back. And then we might do a little bit of welding on the other side. That's in an extreme case. If it's just a scratch, like an even kind of a deep scratch, it's gonna be okay. Unless you see some white on the inside, that's when you start worrying about it a little bit and you start thinking about this putting the flashing, maybe getting somebody to weld it, that kind of thing.
100%. You know, if it's just a little scratch or something like that, give it a name and just
Right.
now you have a new friend that comes along, right?
Yeah.
Did you want to add anything to that, Hans?
Just a couple things with these bigger and bigger boats and motors. If you're landing on a boat ramp, the one thing I would say you don't want to do is go ram the bow of these boats up into, some of these boat ramps have the corduroy looking concrete, and that stuff will absolutely eat your plastic quickly. So if you're putting, when I land into a boat ramp, I come up to it and get within, a couple feet of shore, and then I spin my boat sideways and step out into the water. And just save the keel. Because that's the one thing, the key, and like Shane said, the keel is very, very thick. But over time, if you're just ramming that thing in, eventually you will wear that plastic down. And then, of course, dragging a boat across the parking lot, stuff like that. Anything like asphalt or concrete can do more damage than typical. But you can drag your boat down a river or down a rocky slope or all that kind of stuff you can do. But just parking lots, be careful of that. And the bigger the boat with more gear, you'll do more damage if you're hitting boat ramps with it. So
I agree.
To add to that, I'm actually not too far from Chuck, and I'm actually real fortunate to have him in my backyard. So if something goes wrong with my kayak, do not feel afraid to call a professional like Chuck or someone in your area. They can help you with whatever you need. And if they can't help you, they got people who can. So, absolutely. And just my opinion, you should always take advantage of the resources in the area.
Yeah.
All right. I'm out of here.
We're all here to help.
Happy birthday, Big Phil.
Happy birthday.
Thank you, gentlemen.
So what we'll do, I developed a question that I want to ask at the end of each show, because at the end of the day, it is the Angler's Wisdom podcast, right? And we all love kayaks and design and stuff like that, but we got to squeeze just a little bit of Angler's Wisdom out of it. Shane, I know you're not much of an angler, so you can choose to input or share. Hans, whatever you'd like to share. But as we wrap up, if you had to choose just one or two key pieces of Angler's Wisdom, whether it's something you learned through an experience or a valuable lesson passed down to you, what would they be? And why do you think they're so important for other anglers to hear?
All right. So I'm going to go with, I like to follow the birds. That's my wisdom.
What is it?
I like to follow the birds. I look for birds when I'm fishing these days a lot more than I used to. That's just, it's worked out for me. That's one of the things. And I know there's a thousand things that you guys that are better at this than I am that y'all are looking for, but I've just found that to be really a great way to start, especially if I'm out somewhere and I don't know what I'm getting into. I will look for that presence first. So that's my angler's wisdom.
100%. That is a great piece of angler's wisdom, because out of everything, it probably holds, the majority of the weight, right? To catch fish, we must think like fish. So you got to think about it. Why are those birds there? Well, they're either just sitting there resting on the water, which you can see, or they're actively feeding, right? What are they feeding on? The same thing the fish are feeding on. So where are the fish? Where the food are, right? You find the birds, you find the fish. And I know it's more prominent in salt water, but I've been paying attention on Lake Erie, and just kind of focusing on those birds and trying to, see the effect. And it's the same thing. I mean, at the end of the day, if the birds are there feeding, they're feeding on bait that the fish are also feeding on.
Yeah.
Got Mr. Chad Hoover in the house.
Nice.
All right.
Chad.
Mine's as simple as it could possibly be. And and like I said before, like my fishing has basically been only when I'm on these expeditions in kayaks, going on multi-day river trips. And one of the places that I learned the most was in Chile. We were floating down this river on the Foodalafu, and I watched a local guy, and he had a bamboo stick with one eye, and he had a tin can with a nail through it, and he would reel the cord up like this, and he would huck his spoon, basically is what it was, right into the perfect spot on the edge of the eddy line, and he would haul out these massive steelhead salmon over and over. And I started to put one of those in my kayak, and that's all I had, a piece of bamboo with one eye on the end and a tin can. And it ain't all the stuff you got, it's throwing it in the right spot, right?
Exactly. There's a saying when it comes to steelhead fishing, but it's across the board. Fish is a fish, right? Foam is home. So if you see a foam line, that's where you want to fish, because that's where that eddy line is. You have that transition. You got to think fish are not going to exert more energy than the meal actually provides them, right? So they can't sit in the current, but they need that current to constantly bring a fresh flow of food. So they're going to sit right in that foam, right out of that, on that eddy line, just waiting to pop out real quick, get some food, and get back in.
I have another hilarious anecdote from that sort of experience. Is I was floating down this little river. Again, it was actually a tributary of the Foodalafu. It was tiny little, it was probably 20 feet wide. And I was floating down, and I was seeing all these fish jump all around me. And I would float down and then cast back up, trying to hit the spots where they were. And I went, a couple of miles, and nothing happened. And then finally I stopped and cast downstream and I pulled in fish after fish after fish after fish. Just that whole, cast them where you haven't been, I guess.
Yeah. And, depending on the conditions, those fish, they might be facing different ways. Sometimes they're facing upstream, sometimes downstream. I think the number one thing all anglers should focus on is, like, fish don't read the same books we do, right? So be a scientist. Ignore nope, that doesn't work, it can't happen, blah blah blah, and just go have fun and experiment, right?
Try something different.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, Hans, I apologize for holding you up a little bit longer.
No worries.
We definitely need to work out a second follow-up episode at some point. You guys will be joining me next Friday and Saturday. It's an exclusive thing with the Greater Niagara Fishing Expo. We have the ultimate Legends on the Water kayak fishing expert roundtable with I think we have 11 or 12 experts that are at the top of their game, including Hans and Shane. So if you're in the Greater Niagara area or you're within driving distance, definitely stop out and see us. I think we have a capacity of 60 people on Friday and a capacity of 200 on Saturday. If you would like to reserve a seat, just reach out to me. I'll shoot you a ticket and guarantee your spot. But with that being said, I really appreciate you guys joining me and joining the podcast, sharing your wisdom, not just kayak wisdom, but also some anglers' wisdom as well. And man, I don't want this show to end because there's so many other things that I want to talk about. But hey, patience, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Awesome.
Just gives us a part,
right
too.
on.
And for
Great
everybody
to be on
listening,
here, you guys.
And for everybody listening at home, thank you for joining us today on the Angler's Wisdom Podcast. We hope you found some great insights. Excuse me. Remember, every great angler knows that learning never stops. There's always something new to discover and improve on. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your fellow anglers. And don't forget to tune in next week for more tips, stories, and expert advice to help you catch more fish, stay safe on the water, and continue to grow as an angler. Until next time, tight lines, safe paddles, and always remember, fishing is life, but safety comes first. And don't forget to share your angler's wisdom with the newcomers around you and the future generations. We'll see you next Thursday. Thank you for joining us today on the Angler's Wisdom Podcast. We hope you got some good insight out of the show and learned something new. Don't forget to go over to ampedoutdoors.com and support the title sponsor of the show. Follow them on social media and just show them some love. And lastly, head over to LakeErieKayakFishing.com and check out all the many resources as well as opportunities to book an unforgettable Lake Erie kayak fishing adventure with yours truly. You can also get yourself a Lake Erie kayak fishing gift card, the obsessed angler in your life. And remember, fishing is life, but safety comes first. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next Thursday live on the Angler's Wisdom Podcast.
Oh, yeah! Yeah!
Oh! Oh, it's a nice one.
Yeah!